In this film, Shivani Gupta, who has 25 years of experience working in the area of disability inclusion, candidly reflects on the turning points in her life and how they've shaped her. Embracing the work that drives Shivani, she takes us through the intricacies of access audits, the importance of inclusive design, her experiences working across borders, and the challenges she faces as a wheelchair user.
I'm a wheelchair user since 1992, I think. That's when I met with a car accident and had a spinal injury. And I lost my husband in that accident. And I was also injured. I had some leg fractures and things. So I was on the bed for nearly, because it was a femur fracture, I was on the bed for nearly 8-10 months. And I mean, you can imagine, mentally, I was quite in a bad space, and I didn't know what next. I was completely lost. I couldn't understand, why did I have another accident? I've already had an accident, and a major one. Why did I need another major accident? And I was just very confused and very cut off from everything, as the situation would actually make anyone, I guess. And that's the time when I was just retrospecting everything, why. And I started writing it down, and I think that is when it started, and slowly, okay, let me write it into a book, and it just went on, and that's when, and 2014, it was released. So, No Looking Back is an autobiography that I wrote after the second accident that I had, and this was in 2009. I think life has really moved on after my second accident, and this, of course, I took a break for nearly a year, but then, slowly I started getting back to doing some projects, and the first one was in Ladakh, where, they wanted to create an accessible tourist circuit kind of a thing for persons with disabilities. And after that, I did the audit of Central University, Hyderabad. And following that, I got engaged with the International Disability Alliance. This was way back in 2012. And I was working with them. They were doing training of trainers for monitoring of the UNCRPD of basically organizations of persons with disabilities. So I was supporting them in coordinating those trainings, and so that went on for nearly a year and a half. And following that, I continued working with them for some time, and I did some research on public procurement and accessibility. And there was also a publication that came out on accessibility and public procurement. And then simultaneously I got engaged with the disaster risk reduction work they were doing, and at that time the Sendai framework was being negotiated and consulted, so I was a part of those negotiations. So Sendai framework is a global commitment. It's a UN driven process. It's a global commitment by countries to look at disaster risk reduction. So naturally, our entire effort is that what is being decided, what the world is going to do in terms of disaster risk reduction, it needs to be disability inclusive. So that's where our role came in. Every 10 years, the UN comes out with a new framework for disaster risk reduction. I have to say that the Sendai framework was the first framework where disability inclusion was so well represented. The frameworks before that didn't really have mention of disability.
What does a typical access audit entail?
So, when I say an access audit is simply reviewing a facility, whether it's a service or infrastructure or, maybe transport facility, to, try and see how inclusive and accessible it is for persons with disabilities. Access audits would be done basically based on some standards. And in India, we have the harmonized guidelines for accessibility and universal access, or something they call it. There are also international standards. So, when one does an access audit, you would go there physically. You would actually look at the entire space, take measurements, take photographs, talk to people around, and then, collect all that data, come back and analyze it based on these standards, and create a recommendatory report which, can support people to improve their services, make it more inclusive.
After an access audit, do you or your employer ensure that the recommendations in the report are properly implemented?
In my experience, access audit reports are not implemented in totality. So there are some parts of it which definitely get implemented, some parts of it which get implemented over a long time, some can be much quicker. But it's a journey. The report implementation is a journey. And in any case, making infrastructure accessible is not something people can do overnight. It is a progressively realizable kind of a aspect. So it happens over time. But I think doing an access audit is really the first step.
What was your experience traveling to Pakistan for work? Could you share any interesting stories from your time there?
That was 2015. And during that time, I was also doing some consultancies with CBM. And this was providing support in access auditing and training of organizations of persons with disabilities in Pakistan, in Egypt, in Jordan. So going to Pakistan was really like a very interesting thing to do for me. And to begin with, going to Pakistan, which is like perhaps 1 hour flight from Delhi, took me nearly 18 hours to reach, because there is no direct flight to Pakistan from India. And of course, getting a visa is a nightmare. It took us nearly 1 month rambling here. When I checked in, we realized that my visa was stamped on my personal assistant Ritu's passport, and her visa was stamped on my passport. So we couldn't fly that day. And I was going to Pakistan to conduct a training. So, I have to be there in time, because I'm the facilitator. Well, in any case, we had 1 day extra, and so we postponed the flight. And the next day morning, like, we went to the embassy. As it is, it was so difficult to get it. And thankfully, they kind of changed the stickers, and we were able to fly the next day. And it took so long to reach there. But Pakistan is just like India. I mean, people are so friendly, just as hospitable as people are here. I mean, if a foreigner comes to our country, we are most hospitable. Exactly the same. The food is the same. Everything is the same. Well, I mean, they had a English to Urdu translator for the training. So in accessibility, you have this technical jargon and all, which of course the translator was finding it difficult. But Hindi is like Urdu. So I did that training in Hindi, which was much easier for everyone to understand. And there was a co-facilitator from Pakistan. So if there were certain words, he would translate. But otherwise, it was a fantastic experience.
What kind of work are you currently engaged in?
So, with the GDI Hub, I work as a senior inclusive design manager, and my role is really to work on inclusive design projects. And it's a more Asia looking post. Not that if there is some other work in another country and there is a requirement, I would not work, but yet to kind of do more focused work in Asia. So, presently, I'm engaged in a project with the Expo City Dubai, and they want to, from Expo City, they want to become a legacy of the Expo City, and really they are in the process of transforming into a real city. And they are a very accessible infrastructure already, and they're very conscious about inclusion, and they want to ensure going forward that inclusion and accessibility is embedded, it doesn't get lost. So we're supporting them to create a strategy and guidance documents and things like that. Engaged in projects that we are doing with the Asian Development Bank. I was also actually involved in a research we did under the 80/20 program, which is funded by the FCDO. And here there was a research undertaken in 6 cities across the world, global south cities, to look at the status of inclusive environments in the cities. And it was a 4-year long research. I, of course, came in much later. And it has culminated this year actually at the World Urban Forum, and we were there at the World Urban Forum. And the research has been, findings have been launched as a global action report for, making more inclusive cities. And these are like some priority areas, and which cities can, after evaluations, decide, pick up 2 or 3 priority areas for improvement and slowly improve the situation of inclusive environments.
How much priority is given to inclusion in the development of smart cities?
So when we look at smart cities, as you know, are more focused on making cities more digitally smart. But I don't see as much attention to inclusion as there should be. Because, when we're talking of inclusion, we're talking of a very large group. We're not just talking of people with disabilities. And that's the pitfall. Because when we talk of accessibility, when we talk of inclusion, we just narrow it to people with disabilities. But people with disabilities, of course, it's mandatory for them. But for others, it just makes life so much easier, and we don't look at that. And that is why, if you look at the smart city mandate, I do not think inclusion is one of the main pillars, whereas it needs to be. And the problem is, if we don't make inclusion as a very specific pillar or a guiding principle, it does not get included. And if it does not get included, then retrofitting is awfully expensive. And right now, when we are at a stage when, globally there is a massive, urbanization trend, there is already a dearth of money globally to address this kind of urbanization and to ensure that people have a good life in urban areas. So, if we don't include inclusion, we will never have the money to retrofit. And that is what really troubles me. When we're looking at urbanization, we are looking at a rise of informal settlements. And we all know that disability and poverty are very closely linked. obviously there'll be a large number of people living in informal settlements who are persons with disabilities, and there is nothing that's happening about it. We are talking about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing, and there needs to be more affordable housing, but none of the affordable housing are inclusive or accessible. If you look at the Indra Awas Yojana, and if you look at the house, the square feet space of a house, it cannot be made accessible. So, these basics are missing. Our research in these cities was that governments are working in silos, and accessibility and inclusion are a very cross-cutting aspect. It just sits with the in our country, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment and the Department of Disability Affairs. But that is the department that should actually just be monitoring. It is actually the other departments who should be addressing it. But it's just the other way around. It's that department which is actually trying to implement it. They may be the custodian of the act, but they cannot be the implementer.
Based on your travel experiences, how does accessibility in India compare to other countries?
For work, I've traveled to more than 22 countries. When I look at accessibility, of course, in high income countries is very good. If, like, very recently I went to Singapore, and I really like to use the public transport because that's something that you don't get to use in your own country. I remember the first time I used the public transport was when I went to Geneva, and I used the tram and the bus, and it was such a liberating experience. It was fantastic. And so, yes, if you travel to high income countries, definitely accessibility is far better. But when we look at low and middle income countries like ours, again, the challenges are the same. You can't use the public transport, things are not so accessible. And but I have to say that, sitting in India, we are of course cribbing that, well, we are so way behind, and accessibility is so bad and things. But I think that's a common thing. And I would not say we are so behind. Without criticizing, recently I went to Cairo, and there was this lady who came with a guide dog from, I don't know, some South American country. And she had such a big challenge because, the taxis would not take her dog, the hotel will not allow her dog. And it was a big challenge. But I think it wouldn't have been such a big challenge in India. It would have been much better managed. And so, it's all good to criticize, but things are happening, maybe not at the pace that we want. Things are improving. For me, I've been disabled for 32, 33 years. I've seen the change. And I think it would be unfair to compare yourself to a high income country and say, well, we don't have that, because we are not there, whatever said and done.
What accessibility challenges do you face as a person living with disability like yours?
One of the biggest challenge is transportation. And because transportation is not accessible, you don't really get out. And if you don't get out, you get excluded, and whatever we are talking about, inclusion. And the problem in Delhi is very peculiar, because I understand the sustainability, and we need to have, battery or clean, green transportation, which is all good. In Delhi, we have only CNG taxis. So CNG taxi, what does that mean? That the dicky space is all gone. So when the dicky space is gone, where do you keep your wheelchair? And it's a very peculiar thing. And I think this is something people don't even understand. Every time I have to go to the airport, I have to take a cab, which is perhaps 2 or 3 times more expensive because it has a dicky space. And and this thing of disability related extra costs just keep building, and it is atrocious. Every step of life, anything you do, there is a disability related extra cost that you're paying. And I don't think that the government really addresses it at all.